Imagine in 6 months from now, you're still in the same place, feeling stressed, disorganized, wondering where your money went, or you could feel like your debt is shrinking, your savings are growing, and you finally got a handle on your money. Getting your finances in order isn't about becoming rich, it's about being intentional. It's very easy to overlook money and it can feel like a daunting task, but in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how to get your finances in order within 6 months. If you're new here, my name is Alice. I'm a chartered professional accountant, and on my channel, I help you make money, save money, and invest money. So do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, join my newsletter, and let's get into today's video. The first step is to break down all of your income and your expenses, because when you do this, you gain clarity. You understand where your money is going so that you know what you can do next. So I would recommend sitting down and listing everything out, going through old credit card statements and all of your bills to do a financial audit for yourself. And as a part of this financial audit, you want to take a look at all of your major expenses, the essentials, the non-essentials, take a look at all of your recurring expenses and always know what that number is in your head in terms of essential recurring expenses. The goal of this step is that you want to be in a position where you are cash flow positive and you have more income than expenses. If you are not cash flow positive, then you have to find areas to cut down. Usually the easiest areas to cut down are eating out. That's probably the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to cutting down expenses. Alcohol, small grocery trips, and any recurring subscriptions. Now, I encourage you to not do this step in your head because when it comes to money, sometimes your ideal standard of what you think you do might not actually match your actual actions in your day-to-day life. I'm a CPA and I know that people tend to be biased in thinking that they don't spend as much as they actually do. And this happens both at the individual and the corporate level, right? Because a lot of times businesses don't even realize how much they've spent. Sitting down and going through all of your income and expenses shouldn't take that long, maybe a couple hours, but it will really help you gain clarity, and it's the first step to becoming organized with your money. The second step is to automate your savings and get into a habit of paying yourself first. And the goal here, what we're trying to go for, is to set a habit of always paying yourself first regularly. Now, one way you can do this to build your savings automatically is through something called the split deposit. So for example, you can actually go to your employer or go to the payroll department of your company and ask them to allocate your paycheck into 2 separate accounts. You would just give them 2 direct deposit forms and tell them, put 70% here and put 30% here. If your employer allows you to do this, I would recommend putting a part of your paycheck into a high yield savings account and the rest into your regular checking account where all of your main expenses come out of. So let's say you make $4,000 a month after tax. You can go to your employer and tell them that you want $500 deposited in your high yield savings account and the remaining $3,500 deposited into your checking account. And that way it automatically helps you save money and helps you pay yourself first. Now, if your employer can't do this or you don't want to ask your boss to do this, another way of doing this is to do it yourself, right? To automatically set up savings every time you get paid. And you should be able to do this within your banking portal to basically set up automatic transfers. And when you do this, you are treating saving like a bill payment to yourself. Just like how when you pay your credit card, your hydro, your rent, your mortgage, you are moving money from your checking account to your savings account. That is also a bill payment. It's a payment to yourself and it's a payment to your own future. And if you want to take this one step further, we want to try to increase your savings percentage over time. So if you are saving 10% of your pre-tax salary every year, next year, can you save 15%? The year after that, can you save 20%? This next step is very similar to the previous step, and that is to have a high yield savings account. If you save $10,000 in a regular checking account, the average checking account in America basically pays no interest right now. In 5 years, that $10,000 will still be $10,000. But if you invested $10,000 in a high yield savings account with 5% interest, that's $500 at the end of 1 year versus, again, basically $0 in an account with nothing. Now, when you deposit your money into a bank, banks, they pay you interest and then they use this money to lend it out to consumers, other people, in the form of debt and mortgages. And that's how banks generate revenue. It's through interest income. The reason why banks offer high yield savings accounts in the first place is because it's a way for them to acquire customers. And it also gives them more liquidity, right? So they offer high yield savings accounts as a way to compete with other banks for your business. So make sure you take advantage of them, because almost every single banking institution, financial institution should have some sort of high interest savings option. Now, if you want to take this one step further from high interest savings, you can consider purchasing a GIC. That's what they're called in Canada. In the US, they are called certificate of deposits. And usually these have fixed term dates. So I highly recommend actually comparing the difference in interest rates between a certificate of deposit and what they're offering for high interest savings accounts, and see if there is a huge difference. Usually with certificate of deposits, they will require you to lock in for a certain amount of time if it's non-redeemable. A high yield savings account usually doesn't have any withdrawal restrictions. If your savings account is also your emergency fund, then I would consider maybe putting that towards a high yield savings account. But if you have extra cash that you're looking to save, you don't need access to it immediately, and a certificate of deposit makes sense to you at this time to lock in that money, then you can consider a CD. So once you've gotten to a place where you feel like you're a little bit organized and you have a handle on things, at least you know where money is going every month, we want to set spending limits, because discretionary spend is actually what kills a lot of people financially, right? This can be anywhere from having bad money habits to maybe having some unexpected events or emergencies coming up. So an example of setting discretionary limits is, let's say you make $4,000 a month after tax, and you want to allow yourself 10% of your income to buying random things, right? Miscellaneous purchases, fun stuff, things on Amazon, going out with your friends. That's $400 a month or $100 a week. Now, if you have high interest debts, such as a balance on your credit card, I would highly recommend getting that under control first and paying those off first before doing anything else. Now, when it comes to paying off debts, you can check out my video up top here where I do a pretty thorough explanation between the snowball method and the avalanche method, but you can just pick a strategy that works best for you, okay? Whether you're paying things off by smallest balance first or highest interest. You also want to build up an emergency fund. Now, I personally don't like the phrase emergency fund that much, but when I say emergency fund, I feel like it's understood by people, right? So having 6 to 12 months of cash in the bank. If you are on the more conservative side, you will want to have even more than this. There's no actual right answer. Right, you can have 12 to 24 months of emergency fund if you want. The purpose of an emergency fund is just that, right? It's for emergencies, it's to help you sleep at night. If your monthly expenses, let's say for an example, are $2,500 a month, that's the number that you have to keep in your mind, right? That's how much money you need every month to survive. Rent, food, mortgage, childcare, all of your required expenses. You take that, you multiply that by 6, or you multiply that by 12, and you keep that cash inside some sort of high yield savings account that is easily accessible to you. According to this statistic, 42% of Americans in the US do not have an emergency fund or savings at all. So by doing this and having some cash that's easily accessible in an event of an emergency, you're already doing better than half of people. Next is investing, and the rest of this video is going to be catered towards investing. If you are investing, I would encourage you to do so in a tax-advantaged account and aim to max out your tax-advantaged accounts first. Let's talk about workplace-sponsored retirement accounts. This is a retirement savings plan that's offered by employers, and they are called different things in different countries. In the US, this is called a 401k, and in Canada, this is called the RRSP. In the US, when you contribute to a 401k, the contributions are tax deferred. So you will pay less taxes today, and it allows your money to grow without being eroded by taxes along the way. Okay, this is what's known as a traditional 401k. So, traditional 401k example. If your pre-tax income is $80,000 and you contribute $20,000 to your traditional 401k, you are taxed only on the remaining $60,000. If you pull out $20,000 in retirement, that $20,000 gets added to your taxable income. There's also something called the Roth 401k that offers different benefits. The Roth 401k is funded with after-tax dollars. Your contributions to a Roth 401k do not reduce your taxable income, but it does grow tax-free, and all of your withdrawals in retirement are tax-free. So there are no tax benefits today, but there are major tax benefits in the future, especially if you are investing that money consistently in the long term. So when you're deciding between a traditional 401k and a Roth 401k, you should think about what your tax rate will be at retirement. Because if you expect your tax rate to be lower in retirement, or you expect to be a lower tax bracket in retirement than now, then a traditional 401k is the better option because you pay less taxes on withdrawal. On the other hand, if you expect your tax rate to go higher in retirement, then a Roth 401k might be a better option. Now, there are limits to how much you can contribute to your 401k each year. In 2025, the 401k limit is $23,500 or $31,000 if you're over 50. Most financial professionals will recommend 10 to 15% of annual savings of your pre-tax income. So let's say you make $100,000 a year, that's 10 to 15K going into a 401k. The IRA is another type of account that's designed to help US households save for retirement. Now, they offer the same advantages as a 401k, but the difference is that they are not employer sponsored. So you can open an IRA without involvement from your employer. You can also open up an account in addition to having a 401k or an employer sponsored account. So you can have your 401k and also have your IRA as well. And these come in two types, very similar to 401ks. We have the traditional IRA, tax-free contribution, so you pay less tax today. Withdrawals subject to taxation, so you defer paying taxes into the future. Then you have your Roth IRA, which require taxes to be paid on contributions, but qualifying withdrawals in the future are tax-free. Okay, so you take a tax hit up front, but you defer tax and you avoid paying taxes in the future. So when you are deciding between a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA, think about your future tax rate at retirement. Similarly to the 401k example I mentioned previously. When it comes to a traditional IRA, whether you can claim a full, partial, or any deduction for your contribution depends on whether you participate in an employer-sponsored retirement plan and whether your income is above set thresholds. So for example, if you are a single filer with an employee-sponsored retirement plan making under $79,000, then you can make a full deduction. If you make more than $89,000, you cannot claim a deduction. If you cannot claim a deduction, then a Roth IRA actually is a better choice for you. Now, when it comes to contribution limits, the 2025 contribution limits for the IRA are $7,000 per year if you're under 50 and $8,000 per year if you're over 50. There are also income limits to the Roth IRA. If you're a single filer making over $165,000 or a married couple filing jointly with income over $246,000, you will not be able to contribute to a Roth IRA. One big advantage of the Roth IRA is that it doesn't have any minimum required distributions. You can let it continue to grow indefinitely, which means that you can pass the account to your beneficiaries without having to pay income taxes. Now let's talk about a health savings account, because this is also a great account to set up. A health savings account is a type of savings account that's designed to help you save for future medical expenses, but it can also function as an investment account. The best thing about an HSA is that contributions are tax-free, your money grows tax-free, and withdrawals are also tax-free if you're using the withdrawal for medical purposes. So you can deduct contributions. Okay, so you don't have to pay any tax on interest or dividends that are earned. You use that money on things like doctor visits, prescription refills, then you don't have to pay taxes on the withdrawals. So the HSA is the only account that is basically 100% tax-free. And there are some qualifiers, one of which you do need to be enrolled in a high deductible health plan. So now we've talked about the different accounts and the setup. This process doesn't take too long. Whatever bank or provider you go with, they will usually have all of these options available for you. Now, the goal of investing and what investing does for you is that it helps you speed up the growth of your net worth, and it also prevents your cash from deflating. Okay, so the purpose of investing is to earn interest, dividends, and to realize an appreciation from the investment. Because in the long term, when you're consistently investing in the markets, the goal is to have your money working for itself. How this works is that you invest in a stock, such as Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola pays you a dividend in cash. You use that cash to buy more Coca-Cola stock. So if you're newer to personal finance and financial literacy, I highly recommend starting with safer investments. When you invest in an index fund that tracks the S&P 500, tracks the total stock market, or tracks a segment of the market, you don't have to pick individual stocks yourself. And typically, if you continue investing in these, what we call lower risk investments without pulling out of the market, you will see your portfolio go up over time. And how we know this is by looking at historical data of the US market over a long horizon. Here's an example of the difference between $10,000 invested in 10 years and $10,000 not invested at all. If you invested $10,000, that could grow up to $25,937 if grown at 10% per year. Now, let's say you don't invest that $10,000. It's still going to be $10,000 in 10 years because you haven't invested. But because of inflation, the real value of that $10,000 is going to be adjusted. And it's actually going to be $8,200 if we assume an inflation rate of 2%. Let's talk about investing strategies. So there's something called dollar cost averaging, and we also compare that against something called lump sum investing. Okay, so dollar cost averaging basically means that every time you get paid or on a regular basis, you're putting money into stocks regardless of what the stock price is. So let's say you set a goal of investing $100 a month. Every month you invest $100 into stocks. When the market is up, your $100 buys fewer shares. When the market is down, your $100 buys more shares. But when you do this consistently over time, which is what we call dollar cost averaging, this strategy can lower your overall average cost per share compared to what you would have to pay if you bought all your shares at once at a high time in the market. The biggest benefit of dollar cost averaging is that it makes investing into a habit. And anytime you can turn something into a habit and be consistent with it, that's huge. Especially if you haven't had good money habits in the past. And sometimes it can be hard to time the market as well. When you are dollar cost averaging, it also prevents you from chasing hot stocks. It prevents you from taking on huge amounts of risk. And that's generally what I recommend for beginners, dollar cost averaging. Lump sum investing is fine as well, but since this video is catered towards helping people get their finances in order and building good financial habits, I would highly recommend dollar cost averaging. Just to quickly summarize this video of how to organize your finances in 6 months, the first thing is to start with a financial audit and facing your finances so that you can have more income than expenses and be cash flow positive. And then when you do so, you start building up your savings amount, you start paying yourself first, you start building that into a habit so that you can then create intention with extra money that you have. And that intention could just be to accumulate a bigger emergency fund. It could be to pay off debts. It could be to invest. Anytime you have more money for you in your pocket, it creates more options for you in life. So that could be paying off debts. It could be investing. It could be saving up an emergency fund or just saving money for the purposes of saving money. If you like this video today, you're gonna love my other video on how to manage your income and your expenses. I'll leave a video up top there. I go through in depth of how to use Google Sheets to track your finances. I highly recommend you check out that video. Let me know down in the comments below what questions you might have about getting your finances in order, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Until next time.